Welcome to episode 254 of Silver Lining for Learning. I'm here with my co host, the long lost and found young Zhao, who took a break from his travels to join us today. And of course, the ever dependable Kurt Bonk, who I am sure just finished his, I don't know, 3,468th run before coming here. And I am super excited about this episode because it's two of my friends, and Marie is one of my closest friends. I can say that. I have thoroughly, Marie and I really we love hanging out together. Let's just put it that way. And I've gotten to know Stephanie over the years a little bit, and I really enjoy her company too. So super excited about this episode. Um, Essentially, we'll be talking about a new book that Stephanie and Marie have written called Critical AI in K12 Classrooms. What I particularly love is the subtitle, which is a practical guide for cultivating justice and joy. And I think the juxtaposition of the two J's. Do you see what I did there? I added another J. Uh, is is something that I really thought was meaningful because Maria and I have had this conversation where it's like, why are you guys so serious? You know, and we had this. If you remember that conversation, this is like when we had first met, and I think that's where our friendship really developed because I could ask silly things like this. And so our conversation is focused on this book. I should be transparent. I wrote the preface for this book, which was a pleasure to write because I could combine Diego Rivera paintings with skateboarding and Paulo Freire, which is not something that usually one can see can put together. So that was fun. And so, the thing is, AI is everywhere. Everybody's talking about nothing but AI. The level of hype around it is insane. I just saw a headline from Sundar Pichai as they're releasing Gemini 3.0, which is the ultimate and the greatest and the best. And the headline from the BBC is Sundar Pichai says, "Don't trust Gemini for anything serious." This is literally the headline. I mean, I'm sort of paraphrasing it, but that's the headline. And so we have the strange technology, which is incredibly capable in some ways, but is deeply problematic in other ways. And I think in this book, what's interesting is that not only do you tackle some of these issues head on, but you also take a sort of a positive take towards it, which is like, what now that it is here, how can we, think about it in K-12 context in ways that are productive, thoughtful, justice oriented, but also joyful, I must add, right? So, before we started, I said, can I ask a provocative question to kick us off? So I'm going to ask this provocative question. Like at a time when we are seeing this amazing technology, which is going to transform our lives and make everything better, why are the two of you so against progress? I mean, come on. I don't know. This really bothers me. I mean, here we are. This is the technology of abundance, and we can transform the world, and beautiful things are happening. Why this critical stance? I don't know who wants to start us off first.
Well, are you being facetious?
I am definitely being facetious, which is I want to set the tone for this conversation that we're going to have some fun. This like, make this enjoyable for everybody to listen to, and have some fun with it. So I'm definitely being facetious, but I think it's also a provocative start, which I think lets us get into some of these issues in a deeper way.
Yeah, and it's an important question, I think when any type of book comes out that is not just about roses and gold, there's an assumption that you're against something. We love progress, but we don't like capitulation. And we don't like lack of critical thinking. So it's just so important that we bring that to the space. And you need those things to have progress. What you think, Marie?
I think that was a great soundbite. We love progress, but we don't like capitulation. Maybe we'll just do the interview with you. I don't like progress. I just am gonna like go back to mailing letters to you all, and we'll make this last for 30 years, this whole conversation. No, I said once in another podcast with Neil Selwyn a similar question. I said, I'm not anti-progress, I'm pro-democracy. So I always joke, that, well, it's not a joke, it's real. Progress implies towards something better, right? I often think it has an assumption around the word that we're moving towards something good. And I don't know right now if we're moving towards something good with AI technology, but I would like us to be. So I am very pro progress as long as progress for me means more openly democratic, more just. And in that case, yes, I am
So
very pro progress.
excellent. So that brings me to my first question. This is not a facetious question. This is a serious question. So, in this book, you cover a lot of aspects about AI technology, which should be concerning us. So those who haven't read the book, what would be some of these key things that we should be thinking about? I think you've talked about environmental impact, you've talked about the biases that are embedded in them, and a whole range of other issues. So, if we have to give like a little Cliff Notes version of things that people need to be thinking about that this book dives into, the next question I'll ask is about how we sort of now address it in a classroom context. But what are some of the things we should be thinking about?
Well, we should be thinking about how AI is literally everywhere. It's in our sleep, it's in everything that we do. It's in technology tools that originally did not have AI, like, Kahoot, Canva, Google searches, everything, right? So we want people to just be aware of just the vastness of it and the lack of control that we have if we don't actually do the things to change that. We want everyone to know that our children are just being used to fund tech companies. And the decisions that we make as teachers and as administrators are going to directly impact our students' lives in so many ways that's beyond technology. We want people to know that technology is not neutral, and that the way it perpetuates things, we don't often see it. And Marie and I talked about this recently, very recently actually, about the hidden curriculum of AI and how AI is getting a little bit more sophisticated and sort of covering things up. So we have to just be just hyper vigilant and aware if we are going to progress in good ways.
Yeah, and I would say the Cliff Notes version, if you're asked to read this book and you don't want to ask ChatGPT to summarize it, I'll summarize it quickly and say the first half of the book, we try to contextualize and historicize AI both in its own longer histories and also in the history of ed tech in schools. And then because we think the way to start out anything is like you got to know what this is. And now that you know, and you know that I've started to think like sometimes that ed tech is like brought to us like the virgin birth technology, pure and holy, and set it down in our classrooms to be used for amazing things. But we kind of forget the backstory of it. So we give the backstory. Our middle chapter is like, okay, so where should your brain and heart be around this? And then the second half of the book is okay, now that you know about the technology, now that you have like some options about how we can approach it, here's what we suggest in ways that we do this. And we crosswalk critical pedagogies with how to both either teach with, about, and sometimes against the technology.
Yeah, so I love that aspect of the book, honestly, because I think this piece of edtech being ahistorical in some weird ways, as if it sort of popped out of nowhere, that there is no history to this, and that it doesn't embed within itself a whole range of historical biases and uh, colonial mentalities and so on is something one of the biggest myths that we have, and the fact that you draw attention to that to me is incredibly powerful. But at the same time, then say, okay, now how can we leverage it in ways that we can be more thoughtful and critical about it? So I think that's, and in the other pieces, I think, we also think about these large language models as being all of AI. And I think, Stephanie, what you're saying is that AI is of many different kinds, everything from Google Photos to Google Maps to Siri, to these large language models, and there is a wide range of them. And I don't think there's necessarily people understand all of the different aspects of AI. And I mean, we've Maria, maybe you can give a little synopsis of the work that you and Melissa War have done around bias, because I think that's one that people don't really recognize and understand how pervasive that is.
Yeah, Melissa is doing really great work. And she and I wrote an article together last year about the hidden curriculum of AI. And so we used Apple's idea of her hidden curriculum, right? That schools don't just teach what we say we teach, but through the ways that that schools are structured, the ways that we respond, and sort of the atmosphere of schooling teaches something sometimes in direct opposition to what we say the curriculum of school is. And so for a long time, schools of education have taught how to address the hidden curriculum so that we can teach the things we want to teach. And so we both make the argument that AI itself, like the hidden curriculum of, say, objectivity of knowledge, it has its own sort of screen of objectivity, a screen of a way that it sort of smuggles in a particular agenda. And so the work that we did was looking at the ways that AI responds to student work, and running it through different models. And what we found is that as the models became, I'll say, I'd want to use progress, right? But as they became more sophisticated, they became more sophisticated about the ways that they addressed issues of race, in that it became less obvious and more quiet, and but still enacted in ways that were harmful. So initially, like if you say this student is, and then name a race, this student is white, this student is black, it would score student work actually higher than if it had no indication at all of student race. And it's sort of like in my brain, this is again completely unscientific. I picture someone programming like, hey, if someone brings up race, like be aware, be careful, like consciousness raise ChatGPT, which in fact it lowers its bar when you mention race. But then it gets more sophisticated, right? That gets programmed out, and instead actual words, but instead like things that are associated with race, right, might influence the way that it grades something. And finally, the last part, as it gets even more sophisticated, is that it when in a way that we think like teachers often may use generative AI, especially large language models, is to help provide student feedback, right? Like help me craft a message to this student about this essay, or an email. And if the large language model had a presumption that the student was black or brown, it used a different tone with the student. And this again is the hidden curriculum, right? It used a much more authoritarian tone of how to do something, instead of sort of a coaching tone, like, let's consider this, or you might want to think about XYZ. And the way that that reinforces norms, expectations, compliance is really subtle. And if we're not aware of it, can perpetuates the harms that we already know exist.
Thank you for that. So one of the things I was looking at is as these models get predominant, like spread across the world. So in India, for instance, there is a huge problem of the caste system, and these models are incredibly casteist. It's like mind-boggling how bad it is. I mean, it's far more obvious than with race, for the simple reason that a lot more training has happened on Western data, right? And so once you go out of the Western canon sort of, context, you start getting some of these effects actually get much, much, much stronger. But I know I'm going to pause now and see Kurt, Zhao, if you have questions, comments,
I've
Well,
been
I
thoughts.
have
watching Zhao
too many
smiling into his
questions.
hand. I'm
I
nervous
know
about
this is
what's
going to be
coming.
fun. Yeah.
So I want to start with a simple one that get to be more complicated. Okay, the first one is on the blog post. I'm going to type this text. So you guys wrote this. It says, artificial intelligence is rapidly integrating into today's classrooms, but unlike other new technologies, AI has potential to harm. Are you saying other new technologies have no potential to harm?
That's a great call. I would say no, that other new technologies too.
Oh, good. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Then we got
yeah,
that cleared up.
yeah.
So, okay. So,
Well,
since
Ignore that, but could someone
I,
edit that out?
yeah.
We
I
need to
will
redo
change.
that blog post.
I will edit the blog post.
The point is that it'd be at a higher level. That was the point, right? So it wouldn't be in the same way as generative AI.
well, I think, I mean, any technology can harm, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anything is, because I used to write a book called The Side Effects of Education. What works can hurt. That's, all medicine are poison. But anyway, so that's not the main point. The main
But
thing,
it's
I
important
love the,
though, like a microscope wouldn't hurt in the same way that ChatGPT would hurt.
yeah, because it's more potent. So
Right.
so the I love the conversation. Thanks for writing the book. And again, I'm not. I don't mean to defend AI. I just want to say everybody's as bad as AI. I think AI exaggerates, reflects human beings. So when you are talking about, can we trust AI, for example? Human beings are not trustworthy. And human beings systematically manufacture hallucination on other people, on different races, different religions, different nationalities. You look at this country today, right? So I mean, there is honestly, I would say, no hope because the data is based on human bias, human hallucination. So, would you suggest the same kind of critical look at our human behaviors as we do AI? Because now I worry a lot about we simply say deal with AI as if AI is the enemy. AI is not the enemy. AI summarizes all our human problems. Punya, when you were going to Brussels, I was talking in Brussels, some parents, basically the same thing. Like, have you been lied to by people? Have you been, human beings actually deliberately manufacture things, for their own purposes. So anyway, just want you guys to comment on that.
Yeah, I thank you. I think hold on, there's two things in there that I think we should tease out. One is people lie, people are, systematically people are oppressive, right? Like and AI is doing the same thing. So yes, that is true. That is correct. The difference for me is that we know what to do. We have vast amounts of research on critical consciousness raising, how to address bias in humans, right? I'm never not going to be biased, but I always cringe a little when I hear someone say like, "Well, we're just relocating the bias from humans to a machine." Yeah, but it's different. I think if you think that my brain works the way that artificial intelligence works, if we're comfortable with like sort of seeding the metaphor to computation in me and pretend I'm not embodied and also pretend I'm not at scale, right? Like that I'm an individual, then maybe we both have the same bias. But I don't think that's true. And so I think we have a way to uh undo undo the harms of bias and teach and make aware and consciousness raise in humans and at a social level as well in systems with I don't know what to do with bias in AI, right? I guess we can keep like trying to program it out of existence, right? Try to rationalize it out of existence. But I'm like actually very deeply curious about this. This is a line of research that I would love to try and like take up is do we critically consciousness raise in humans? I don't think we critically consciousness raise in AI. So I don't know what to do, and I'm curious what to do about that. But there was a second thread that you said, and remind me the second half of your question.
No, I was just really thinking about,
Was it? Yeah.
because what
Yeah.
what yeah, Marie, your comment is right because I was just in with DeepMind in London 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about how can we reduce hallucination to 0.1%, something like that. But that's just one level. Another level is really the data itself,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
human beings manufactures data, and as right now, I'm sure Stephanie, you guys are all aware of like teachers, individual teachers in different countries, different systems, they are forced or they are enculturated to have bias. And having bias actually is considered an honor, considered a respect, in some cultures. I mean, in the US, you have the same too, right? We celebrate some biased views. It's a lot of, it's more than hallucination, it's deliberate bias. So whatever data, AI is going to be based on, is going to continue. That will never be wiped out. So that's what I was talking about. Anyway, go ahead, Maria and Stephanie.
Okay, so Stephanie, I just have one more thing. I'm sorry that this clearly was like a good question. It triggered me in the best way. So the other thing that I think about with AI, I've like started calling it the constants of AI ethics. Like there are certain things about its design, its infrastructure, and its development that no regardless of the effects, right? Regardless of how it's implemented in society and what it might influence, those things are sort of held constant. The fact that it's built on extracted or stolen data, like that's just the case. That's not changeable, right? So that is unethical. The fact that it is built in infrastructure that uses extractive practices for materials and minerals, that's just the case. It is. So we can say like, but it can be used for really powerful things. And it may be. I was just at a geographers conference speaking about ethical AI, and what geographers are doing with geo AI is actually amazing. Like the ways that they're identifying potential places for famine, or the ways that El Nino might cause storms in places that need to be aware of that and predictive. It's really cool. It does not negate the fact that like there is badness baked in at the start. And I don't know that the original sin of AI means we can't use it, but I am saying like that is different than a bias in a human being. So, okay, now I'll stop. I was really on a soapbox for a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything you said is true. I mean, I'm scared right now because where we're at in our society, like you said, Zal, you get it's a good thing to be racist right now, right? Like people are saying the quiet part out loud right now in ways that had not happened before. So, diversity is a horrible thing right now. Inclusion is a horrible thing right now. All of those things. So when we're talking about human bias that is perpetuated in AI outputs and looking at where we're at socially, politically, it's scary. All right. Yeah, like people, as Marie said, the way we structured the book, the first three chapters sort of talks about what AI is. Most people have no clue what AI is and that it even comes from humans. People think that AI is this neutral thing that gives you the answers and you can be more efficient and more effective in your everyday life, which we know is not true. But most people don't have that understanding. Um, when using technology in general, I believe that we should only use it when necessary. Like, I don't know, like, why we need to use technology for every single thing, and particularly AI. Looking at the environmental impacts, but everything else, like, I think we should limit it. Um, I would love if we just had a bunch of wall gardens that had information that didn't have any misinformation, any disinformation, that, was already looked at, that used diverse data sets, that didn't actually have bias. I know, like, is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen because technology exists for one purpose, for money. That's the reason why technology exists, right? I mean, we're writing about it because we know that schools have technology, right? And we know technology does good things. I come from a special ed background. I started with assistive technology. Like it's a great thing for some people. But we wrote this book to sort of like at least, since we know it's, the inevitability thing, we know it's here. How can we like use it in the right ways? That doesn't really answer your question all the way about humans, but definitely we're in scary times right now. And we really need to think about why we're using it, when we're using it, how we're using it, acknowledging that, yeah, like the data is just overwhelmed with just biased people, racist ideas, oppressive things. And if we're going to continue to use this data out there and not do like wall gardens, then, at least we need to know how to navigate it and understand that it's there and not
So this
believe it.
is Pune,
So,
you got
Zhao,
me started. No, I got
no, let me, I want to jump in here
all
quickly.
right, okay.
All
God,
right.
I have another question,
Right.
but go
No, your
ahead.
question is not important. My comments are. No, I just have quickly couple of things here. So one is, I think Stephanie, you alluded to the point that very often technology is seen to be neutral. So when we say, oh, a computer is doing X, means it's not bringing in human biases. I think large language models in particular are much more prone to, because they are stochastic, because of a variety of different reasons, because sometimes because of the design. I mean, Grok is deliberately being designed to say that Elon Musk is more powerful than LeBron James. I mean, that's not just happening by chance. That's somebody tweaking some knob somewhere. And I think that the more we ask questions about that knob, the more important it is. But a bigger point that I wanted to make was, Marie, something that you built on, talked about, that we have to acknowledge sort of the nature of this technology and the extraction that it is doing. And the analogy that I give to it is this: growing up in India, which was a colonized country, which if you go back to 1600s, 1700s, China, India were among the richest nations. At one point, India was 25% of the world's GDP. All of that was stolen through colonial activities. And now it allowed people in Europe to have salons where the Enlightenment could be, and they could talk about the equality of humanity. Growing up in India in the 1970s, 80s, those ideas were deeply inspirational to me. So one can both appreciate the power of that all men are created equal, that idea, but also at the same time recognize that there were a whole bunch of people who were disenfranchised, whether through slavery, whether through colonialism, whose humanity was denied to them. Both of these things can be true at the same time, and which is why I think this book tries to walk that balance and say, yes, we can use it, but at the same time it's wrong to ignore those other parts of it. There are enough people who are talking about one side of things, not enough people talking about the other. I think that's, to me, is, I think, a very important point, because I feel that all the time. It's like, why were there not salons in Delhi, in the streets of Lucknow, right? Because that country had been decimated through a systematic process of colonialism. Now, I can't go back and change history, but I can acknowledge that, even while acknowledging the power and beauty of the ideas that came out of the Reformation, that came out of the Enlightenment, that came out of the scientific revolution. All of those things can be true. And I think education is about. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now, Zhao, or back to you, or Kurt, whoever wants to go next.
Kurt, go ahead before I jump in, because this can be a long conversation. Go ahead, Kurt.
No, you can keep going, Zoe. It's yours. I've got stuff, but I'll get
all
to
right.
it.
Well, the reason I'm saying I'm just going to talk to you guys about this, because as you know, Punya, one drag Punya and Kurt Bunk, we're all old people, and we've seen a lot of things. Because when you were talking about schools by money, about different versions, I was also thinking, for example, libraries. Libraries supposed to provide information. But now we have parents going in, pull books out from school libraries and from other places. And we always act on behalf of some kind of authority to limit kids' access to books, to movies, to TV. So we've always exercised those kind of activities. And schools, of course, schools have wasted a lot of money buying all sorts of technology from the internet. Remember 30 years ago, we're connecting everybody. Now we're spending money disconnecting everybody, right? Because there's too much connection is bad, well, not too much. We are banning cell phones. So what I was really thinking about, a book like this can be extremely valuable, but at the same time, I think as we started talking about, lacking a historical perspective of school finances, school purchases, all of this, could be could lead to us to just think about AI. Because I really think all the problems you point out applies to everything, to standardized testing, to curriculum, to books, to teachers, to everything. So, I was just wondering, when we approach this, I don't want people just to simply focus on AI. I think schools is largely politicized, largely driven by money, and largely driven by votes, whatever that thing is. So I just want to, Steph and Marie, your general comments, reactions to this, especially when you go out to make presentations, when people read the books, so how can we not simply focus on AI as the thing? Of course, right now, we know, like Punya said, we said, we cannot talk about anything right now without talking about AI.
Yeah, no, I love this question. And I'm actually tired of talking about AI too, even though I know I'm going to be talking about AI because it's there. I have a master's in library information science, and I'm always thinking about information. What's interesting about the history of the library is that it was the information that was in the libraries weren't for everybody. They were built for expanding knowledge for rich white people. Right. So like libraries in itself started out as, not inclusive, and really, segregating. But then after decades went on, they established the free library, which would be open to everybody. And then we can get into how it's still dependent on your zip code to know what type of resources you actually had in your free library and information. Um, I love dystopian stories, which is probably not a good thing because they all, are just about how the world is going to end. And, usually some portion of our liberties and information is being, taken, whether they're, getting rid of the books and they're burning all the books. They don't want you to know anything. Because the less you know, then the more they can, really, make you, put you into submission. Um, yeah, if this book gets on a book ban list, then I will know that this is a great book. Because they don't want you to read books that are really, really good. I actually, in saying all that, I forgot what the question was.
Well, there was no question. There was more of a comment. Like you talk about burning books. Every
Yeah,
government's burn books. That's what they
yeah.
did, right? It's
So So yeah, they might not. I think, oh yeah, it's just like, how can we like kind of like talk about this without just talking about what focusing on AI. I mean, this topic, you can put the computer, you can put any other thing. I mean, you can put like a non-technology to it. The whole purpose is that understanding the way the world is built, how information is shared, how it's misused intentionally through disinformation or unintentionally through misinformation, how our school systems are just embedded and just built on these structures that are not for everyone. So I think we can have the conversations in the book and not really talk about AI because like these things, like you said, are just inherent in our educational structures. And it's just important, like, building a critical consciousness about everything, right? Not just about AI. You really need to be, have it. And then if you're, you might become outraged, right? Like there's like like a saying, like when you're like informed, you're enraged all the time, right? So, Marie, I don't know what you think about that.
I think I appreciate that you shared all of that. And I'll add on that our second chapter, where we try to historicize AI in terms of ed tech generally, is like our Larry Cuban, Audrey Waters chapter. And we, yeah, we, I don't know where I found this poem first, but it's in we opened the chapter with it. And I actually like went and first I'm gonna read this. Okay, I'm not gonna tell you when it was written, but it's called Antiquated. Mr. Edison says, "The radio will supplant the teacher. Already, one may learn languages by means of Victrola records. The moving picture will visualize what the radio fails to get across. Teachers will be relegated to the backwoods with fire horses and long-haired women, or perhaps shown in museums. Education will become a matter of pressing the button. Perhaps I can get a position at the switchboard." And this book, that was written in like 1922, I want to say. I'm going to double check right now. I found the book. Yes, so I went online. I don't know, I've got my blur on. Hold on, you're going to get to see all the curtains. I went online and found a copy of the book and I bought it. And this whole book, it's a book of poems written by a teacher, Virginia Church, 1925. And everything in here, I mean, there's like 8 day, an hour work week, democracy, the words I can't say as a teacher. Like you could have picked it up in 2025. I love this book so much. So I just to sort of to echo what you were saying, Zhao, yes, it is an ongoing problem, partly around the structure of schools, partly that we have a common good that we refuse to fund for the common good, and therefore we turn to funding from private sources. And to sort of summarize the thesis of Audrey Waters' book, the Teaching Machines book, it's not that teaching machines have changed education. It's that what they have done is allowed for the narrative of education to become even more neoliberal, that we have allowed to say we need to have individualized approaches. We need private funding to privatize this common good is actually the result. Her thesis is that is the result of technology in education. Not that we've transformed anything really in the last 100 years, but that we've transformed the narrative.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing. Just takes 1 minute, Kurt. You'll get your chance. You can dominate the rest. Okay. I was just think about the poetry book. I think it was in 1912 when Thomas Edison said about film replacing all teachers. Because I was also think about Socrates. He was illiterate, so therefore he was anti the invention of writing. He hated writing because he was illiterate, he couldn't read, so he hated writing. That was 2,000 years ago. So we did really rethink about that piece because, I mean, writing as a technology has brought us a lot of things we could not imagine without it. But at the same time, it has got us in so many troubles. It's a bad technology as well. So I was reading an article, Pune, in my it was, I think, out of BBC. No, maybe it's the Guardian's talk about we're reading too much, for example. So writing, many people think reading is good, writing is good, but not necessarily. Depends on what you're allowed to read, what you're allowed to write. I think is so that's something quite interesting. I'm glad we're talking about this topic, but I cannot dominate. And Punya runs the show. We got Kurt Bunk waiting.
Wait, but can I dominate? So I'll just say, yes, I agree with you, right? I can't imagine. Punya and I have wrote an art or a book chapter and started with this, right? That yeah, yes, I appreciate writing as a technology. I use it all the time, and it has enabled me to do in like what I do, being able to access text. I do see the point, right, of what we lose with orality. And the Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., one of the Smithsonian museums, has this really, to me, it was very powerful when I walked in. On the floor where all of the treaties are between the US and different nations, at the beginning, before all the treaties are displayed, and they display each treaty and then they show the next time that it was broken by the US government in the next treaty, there is a perspective, a primary source, and I can't remember who the primary source is, but essentially from the British and American side, it was like, of course we're going to put this in writing. That's how you know that this is real, because we've written it down on a piece of paper. And the Indigenous Americans were like, why would you write something down? Are you not trustworthy? Is your word not trustworthy? Like, I don't trust that you have to write this down. I want to trust you as a person. And so I always think of that framing because, I'm like a big think about what might we potentially give up. And I'm not going to give up writing, but I do appreciate that we gave up something about what it means to value the word spoken word.
I've recently heard some rumblings about concerns that AI is making programmers illiterate. So maybe Socrates might be happy.
There you go. Go ahead, Kurt.
All right. Been listening carefully to all you guys here today. It's a wonderful conversation that we're having. Even though I will slightly disagree that educators should push the world forward as much as possible whenever we can, because there's so many people trying to beat us down and tell us we're wrong and, just anti-progress of any shape or form that it might take. So anyways, I have to correct Young. AI has helped me. Young, I went online and it says it has been approximately 2,425 years since Socrates died in 399. This is an AI telling me this, so it must be true, right? The current year is 2025. And around the year that Socrates dies, 399, it's 2,424 years ago. And then it says, which rounds up to 2,425. It doesn't tell me why that rounds up, but anyways, yeah. So you're just 424 or 425 years off. No biggie, no biggie. They would probably let you get away with that in schools. Just saying. AI did help me there. We also found out from Young that I'm old. And Punya's old and he's old. I mean, I'm really old. I'm really old. So today's been an enlightening show. And I looked this up too while you were talking, and AI told me that I've been running for 2,055 days. I took a 17-day off for surgery last year, but 2,055 days of running at least 2 miles. And today I can say I was old on the trail. Yesterday, I was pretty fast. It's an every other day kind of thing, being old. But anyways, I'm going to take us back because we're talking about history here. You guys seem to be trying to date me a bit. So I'll take you back to my middle school days, okay? And talking about AI for a second and talk about Marie's and Stephanie's wonderful project and new book. So, in middle school, he taught us who, what, when, where, and why. And we know the who. We know the who's Marie and Stephanie. They're the who's that did this new book. And Punya, can you hold up that book for us again and read the title for people who might want to buy that book? Tell us who the publisher was. Why don't you read the title so people who are listening on the trail can write this down?
All right. Critical AI in K12 Classrooms, a practical guide for cultivating justice and joy, with a foreword by Punya Mishra and Harvard Education Press.
Oh, you wrote the foreword. Okay. All right. And so Harvard Press, very impressive. So we know the who and we know the what. We got a book, right? But what about the where, when, and why? So I'm going to ask some of you. You can answer any of these that you want to. So let's who, what, when, where, why. So when did you start this project? AI's. When did the spark happen for this project? I'll frame this all from the standpoint of spark. When was the spark lit in both of you to do this book? And then where was this spark lit? Where were you guys at the time that this happened? And where is the spark now? Okay, so for you all, and why was this spark lit? I mean, to answer some of this, when, where, and why. When did this happen in history? And where did this happen in history? Why did this happen? And then take us to today. And what's happening in your minds today, and where's the spark continuing to ignite, if you will? And I have a follow-up question if we have time, but if anyone else wants to jump in, it's okay. But who would like to? Stephanie unmuted her mic, so I assume Stephanie wants to jump in first. Stephanie?
Oh, I just been unmuted the whole time. It's just easier. But
Okay.
but I can yeah, I can start. So the win, I guess, 2 years ago, although I will say that the spark for both of us has probably been our careers. If you look at the work we've been doing with ed tech and justice and civic engagement. But I guess the spark for this particular project about 2.5 years ago, I actually received an email from Harvard Education Press from an acquisitions editor. And they
Really?
emailed me, yes, and they said, I've read some of the things that you've written on AI. Would you write a book for us on AI? And I was flattered because this is my ninth book. But I never had Harvard email me before then. So I felt, I felt flattered that happened. And I told the acquisitions editor, we met and I said, sure, I'll write this book, but it has to be justice centered. because there were too many books coming out 2.5 years ago on AI that was just nonsense. They were just like quick books just coming out. AI is going to be progressive and is going to do all these things. But I didn't see anything justice centered. Now, probably about a year in, I started seeing more stuff on equity. I mean, sorry, on ethical AI and responsible AI, but that's a lot different than what we're talking about with justice. So Marie and I were colleagues already. We were working with SITE, which is the Society for Information Technology and Teacher Education organization. We actually were inaugural co-chairs for the Culture and Climate Committee, and we were charged to be critical friends to SITE and to make sure that membership practices and research really align with, equity. So we were doing that work already. We were looking at award-winning papers. We did a little bit of research on that. I think it was called Justice in Marginalized Spaces, right, Marie? And we were looking at what type of ed tech research is actually being awarded. Like what do we actually value? So we're doing that work, and I asked Marie. I said, "Would you want to write this book with me?" Because Marie, as Punya mentioned, is amazing, and she has great ideas. And I, coming from a special education background, I feel like you need different perspectives on it. So, if I was a special ed teacher and I work with a general education teacher, I think together we can create the best pathway for a student because we'll bring in our different strengths and everything. So that's how I saw this book as well. So, the email from Harvard kind of sparked this particular project. And then when we got together, the sparks just like flew there. And the win was 2 years ago. And then the why is it's just absolutely necessary. Like I mentioned, the books were just coming out about AI that I called nonsense. I mean, maybe they weren't nonsense, but I felt like a lot of thought didn't go into it, and they all were pretty much the same. Like AI is great, this is what it is, and everything's going to be better with it. I wasn't seeing enough on the real issues that are needed, that teachers need now on it. So that's the why. This is just a critical book. And even if you Google now, probably critical AI or like Justice Center AI books, there's going to be a dearth. I mean, we still need more. So what you
So
think, Maria?
before Maria jumps in here, you've been a board member, I think, for ACT, a council member for SITE, and you won an award for ISTE. For the younger people listening in the audience here to this recording who are, just early career people, which of those organizations have you benefited the most from, and do you recommend that people explore? I mean, maybe all of them, but ISTE, SITE, and ACT are mentioned in your bio. Who right now do you see as doing important things that people might want to get involved with or recruit right now to help you get some members to join you in your efforts? With any plugs you want to make before we move to Maria?
Marie, I mean, if I would plug anything, I'm going to plug Marie's organization, the Civics of Technology Project. That's where I need to plug because they have the resources, they have the mission, and they have the lens. ACT, Site, ISTE, all organizations that have different impacts. Within those organizations, though, are the people. Right. So it is the people. Like we mentioned, Melissa Ward, she was a SIG chair for the artificial intelligence, or one was it, I think the AI SIG. I think she was the AI SIG. Anyway, she was a SIG chair for the AI SIG. As a council chair, I'm over 23 different SIG, all the information technology SIG. So that's one of the SIGs. So it's like it's not just the organizations, it's the people in the organizations who are in these SIGs who are doing the work, like the work that Marie, and we were working with. Now I'm getting a blame. We were working with other people on the Culture and Climate Committee. Like it's the people, right? So not just the organizations, but the people in the individual units. I feel like, that's where the work is at. But definitely the Civics of Tech is where you need to spend all of your time. They send out a lovely newsletter every Sunday. I look forward to them, and they have more like meaningful content than these AI books that are just popping up everywhere. They're just nonsense, like I said.
Yeah, they are a lot of nonsense out there. Totally, totally. So thank you for clarifying that. So any Maria, you want to add to anything there about the who, what, where, and why?
Yeah, I think that Stephanie got I agree with everything she said, and I think I'm going to tie this into the conversation for folks early in their career. The thing that I have been able to do through every organization is always meet people who I'll just say I vibe with. I vibe coding. I love vibe conferencing. Right? Like I just who I'm like they're a thoughtful person, right? They're thoughtful. And I don't always agree with the work that right? We all do different things, and that's great, actually, right? That helps me understand more. But I have been so fortunate to just be able to connect with people who are good thinkers and kind people. And that uh, has made everything I do pleasant and enjoyable, right? And it has turned out for me, and I don't know that this will be true for everyone, but for me, following the things that feel right, both because the people are good and because it aligns with the what I value. And I really appreciated when Punya shared how his that like lovely story about the values of the Enlightenment sitting in tension with the realities of how it was that Europe got to do that, right? I'm a former high school social studies teacher, and the values and the ideals behind democracy have always driven what I do. And teaching that the reality of that, right? We have a lot, it was built on slavery, it was built on, stealing lands, and still that is ultimately like for me the thing that guides what I do. And so I'm always feel good about my work and and I always feel good about the people. So for me, the spark for this book was like we get to do that and think about those like ideals, values that drive me with somebody, Stephanie, who I just both get to enjoy like as a colleague and as a friend. So yeah.
Wonderful. My follow-up question, if Punya and Young don't want to jump in here,
Oh,
I
I
just want
do,
to,
Kurt, before you do
yeah.
that, because I love this conversation. So, Maria and Steph, because sorry, Kurt, I just want to jump
Oh,
in
it's good, good.
because well, I'm glad you corrected our age, but anyway, we're still old. The point actually was going to ask you. Because right now, because I think, Steph, you talk about being anxious, worried. I think we are all in that sense. I've been to this year from more than 12 countries, and everywhere you go, people are worried. Kids are worried, parents are worried, teachers are worried. So I really want to ask you, as a younger generation, and how hopeful are you that education will get better? Remember, education is not necessarily good. There are always bad education. So I'm just really checking with you guys to say, with or without AI, with you're talking about racism, you're talking about really genocide. I mean, just talk a lot of horrible things happening now. Do you see great hope in schools and in our future teachers in education?
Um, Sometimes. Sometimes. I think a lot of, some teachers may be like me, and I'm not like just scared or anxious all the time. Um, just thinking about it though, it is scary. I think that there is some hope, but there is also just some trepidation. And I think that that's okay. I think what's important is that teachers feel like they have support where they're at and resources that can help do that. I also think that we need to get out of our own like spaces and see what else is going on, right? There are just so many tech. I don't, Marie doesn't like this word, but there are like a lot of technology advances. I just remember when I studied abroad in Seoul, South Korea at Ewha Women's University. And I remember, and it's still true today, it's the only place that I've been where you can unpress the elevator buttons. And I just was amazed by that. We're talking about 20 years ago. we still can't do that in the United States. Like, I mean, we just like I don't know why, but we cannot unpress elevator buttons. It's one of the things that really actually like annoys me. Like, why can't we do it? I remember it in the dorm, and I know the student affairs people are like, it's a residence hall, but like, where we like slept at, all the floors were heated, and when we would walk, the light would sort of follow us because they only like kept lit where you were at because then you wouldn't waste electricity. I don't know. Like I just feel like, there's an answer out there, right? Like there are things going on in other places that there is not going on where we're at right now here. So I do have some hope that like maybe like some of those things will come over here, in concert with like what the work that like Marie and I and others are doing. And the fact that we're talking about it right now, we've had the opportunity to, be guests on a few podcasts, and a book just came out last week or a few weeks ago in October. Um, we've been invited to a few institutions to talk about this, so I think people are becoming a little bit more interested in the work, and I do think like that gives me hope that at least the conversations are happening.
I
All
think
right, I hope you can unpress the button soon. Okay, that could happen. Just but Marie, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say first, I think unpressing the elevator button is a great title to something. I don't know what it would be, a poem, an essay, but it's just a great phrase. Um, And two, I really appreciate that we are the younger generation as a person who does not feel that young anymore. Thank you. And then three, the question of hope, I think, ties in with Punya's story of the time we first met. And he said, "Why are you guys always so serious?" Right? Which is that it turns out, no, in fact, I'm quite hopeful. And I think that I would never have become a teacher or in particular a social studies teacher committed to like you can't do that without believing that both individual change and social change is possible. And I lost what I was going to say. It was going to be so inspiring too, really good. But um but yeah, I don't I do know what I was going to say. There are lots of times in history that have been worse than the one that we are in, right? And part of the reason that we wrote the book and turned to people who have long worked towards justice in deep shadow of oppression have always, right? The fact that you do that is hopeful, right? And there are tactics, there are efforts, and the Martin Luther King quote, "The arc of the universe bends toward justice," but really only if we do it, right? And the act of working towards justice is hopeful. It is like, and so it doesn't mean it's going to happen in my lifetime, right? Like, but I feel like I've had all this Christian imagery that, metaphorically, in my whole conversation, like the original sin of AI and all that. But I'll say one more thing about like I think it's building a cathedral, right? I always look at cathedrals in Europe and think like the people who worked on that cathedral who were building something that they found so profound, like they were not going to be alive to see it finish, but they imagined what it would bring to the people after them. And I think that's all of our work. So for me, that is both hopeful and joyful and beautiful in a way that is not just like immediately fun giving, right? But is like the good work that is good soul work that makes you realize like your life is worth living and doing. So there it is.
That
We've
was
all
inspirational.
We only have a couple of minutes left here today, and it's been a wonderful conversation. I do have a follow-up question. It's a very short question, but I want to say that there are many places we could use the unpress the elevator button expression, a motivation book, a eulogy, a resignation letter, a graduate school application cover letter, or a commencement address. And those are just five. There's probably many, many other places we could use that. It has been wonderful. It's great having you. And by the way, we've got both of you in the East Coast. I'm holding up the Midwest here, and Punya and Young are on the West Coast. So we've got the country covered. It's just a simple question. I've been working in the self-directed learning area for a couple of decades, and I've recently come up with a little checklist for self-directed learning in AI integrated environments, in particular for language learning. I'm wondering if in your book somewhere you have a set of guidelines or checklists for teachers or students or administrators. Is that, and could you give us a couple of quick examples of what would be in those guidelines or in that checklist? We only have a minute left for each of you. Marie, would you like to? You were nodding your head yes, so there must
Oh,
be
yes.
something in
Sorry.
there.
I
Yeah.
would say it's not a checklist per se, but their last chapter is like actions you can take, which we organize by the personal, the pedagogical, the professional, and the participatory. So there's some very specific actions, and then we say we sort of we number them, but we say this is not like based on numbers, like you have to follow the rules, you're going to go back and forth between this, but naming and saying out loud, like, here's how the technology was built, here's how schools are, note acknowledging that, and then thinking, what am I going to do about it? And then enacting sort of those different suggestions that we have and moving sort of up and down that, I'll say, ladder, I'm not sure, is sort of our suggestion. Stephanie, what else did we do?
Yeah, like so we in the subtitle, it's a practical guide for cultivating justice and joy. So that last chapter is called Towards Just AI, right? So this is actually the action steps you can take to contribute to a more justice use of AI in classrooms. And there is an activist and former radio show host. He passed away last year. His name is Joe Madison. If you ever heard of him, he was on Urban View Radio Sirius XM 124. And the whole purpose of that channel is when power becomes action. And he used to always say, when people call to complain about what's going on, he said, what are you going to do about it? So that chapter is in that vein. Like, what are you going to do about it? We know that AI is harmful, but we know that it is here and that teachers and students are going to have to use it. So what are you going to do as a teacher to ensure that the AI use is used in justice-centered ways that bring joy? So that's what that whole chapter is about. And we have plenty of examples of conducting your own techno-skeptical audit in your classroom, taking Marie and Dan, someone else, taking your personal own data and, limiting your footprints, looking at your own digital footprints, looking at your searches. I mean, there's just a ton of things because it's those four categories, but that's what we have to offer teachers beyond the checklist, just very substantial things that they can do to sort of join this fight because we're fighting right now, but we're fighting for good because we're making good trouble. And we talk about that, John Lewis, right? We're making good trouble, and that's what we're doing. And we invite teachers to join us in it.
Wonderful. Young or Punya, you have any final comments before I introduce the next show?
No, this was just great conversation. Thank you. I didn't want to duplicate the conversation we had with the Harvard Library, and I think I succeeded in that. And I think we really got into certain deeper sort of ideas and thoughts, and that was great. So thank you, both of you, for writing the book and for joining us in this conversation.
And thank you, Punya. And I just want to know now, what do you think? Are we for or against progress?
That was a great yes, Stephanie.
No, I'll come back to something that I think both of you said there, which is that there is a certain definition of progress. And I think when you talked about sort of justice and joy, when you talk about that as educators, we are always looking to the future, that without that, there is like, why would you be an educator if you didn't have hope? So there is a version of progress that I think we can all agree on, and that doesn't necessarily be defined by five companies who have the trillions of dollars to train these large language models. That there is a progress there, right? I mean, and so yes, I do think that you're both for progress, and that was a facetious question to kick us off, but I think it led to a great conversation, so I will take some credit for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all for hosting us and for letting us talk about the book and our work. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the style of the podcast and what you all bring. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Kurt, keep us posted on eLearn if you're going to be in Seoul.
And you women's, we're going to be in Seoul, actually. No, I shouldn't, I can't announce it here. Most likely, so we've moved eLearn from North America to Asia last year. We were in Singapore last year, Bangkok this year, last month, in fact. Next year, it looks like it could be most likely going to be Seoul, but I can't announce it officially. We're exploring Women's, we're exploring Seoul National and other places. But next week, We're going to have this gentleman on the show along with his colleagues at the Learning Policy Institute. This is Walker Swain, who's developing equity-oriented research as the principal researcher there. They have a new report. I have the abbreviated, the executive summary in my hands here. This is on community schools' impact on student outcomes, evidence from California. They spent $4.1 billion on community school partnership program launched in 2021, is the nation's largest community schools initiative, now serving 2,500 schools. This study assesses how to effectively get community school partnership program going with high need students and the early impacts are going to be talked about next week. So brand new report out in September. And we've got them now on this show. Come join us. It'll be in 2 weeks, actually. We're taking a break for Thanksgiving next week, in 2 weeks at noon Eastern. We look forward to the show. Thank you all, Stephanie, Marie, Punya, Young. It's been a great show.